The roar of the Colosseum never reached the places where the screams truly lived. Above the sand, Rome cheered for blood and glory. Below it, in the damp stone belly of the arena, another story unfolded, one Rome buried so deeply that even history hesitates to speak it aloud. This is where the women waited, shackled not just by iron but by fear, uncertainty, and the knowledge that the games did not end when the crowd went home. Beneath the arena, the air was thick with the smell of sweat, rust, and old fear. Torches flickered along narrow corridors, their light revealing walls scratched with names, prayers, and warnings carved by trembling hands. Female prisoners were kept here, captives from conquered lands, accused criminals, slaves who had displeased their masters. Rome called them property. The arena called them tools. They were brought underground long before the games began. Some were young, barely more than girls, stolen from villages that no longer existed. Others were mothers, queens, or priestesses whose status meant nothing once Rome's chains closed around their wrists. They were stripped of identity first. Names were replaced with numbers. Hair was cut short. Fine clothes were torn away and replaced with rough tunics meant to humiliate and remind them that dignity was a luxury they no longer possessed. The gladiators knew of these corridors. Some had walked them as prisoners themselves before steel and training earned them a chance to fight. They were men shaped by violence, owned by l'honnêteté, praised when they killed well. Rome admired their strength, but it also poisoned them, teaching them that mercy was weakness and dominance was survival. Not all gladiators were monsters, but the system ensured that cruelty was rewarded. Beneath the arena, they were sometimes sent not to fight, but to break. Guards would push female prisoners into holding chambers and lock the doors. The women never knew why they were chosen, only that footsteps approaching meant something terrible was about to be demanded of them. Sometimes the horror came disguised as entertainment rehearsals. The women were forced to reenact scenes meant for later spectacle, mythological punishments, humiliating roles where they played victims destined to lose. Gladiators were ordered to practice, to intimidate, to remind these women of their powerlessness. Laughter echoed in those chambers, not always from joy, but from men laughing because fear had become the only language they were allowed to speak. The prisoners learned quickly that silence could be as dangerous as protest. Cry too loudly, and the guards would punish everyone. Resist, and you might be dragged away and never seen again. Survival became a careful performance, eyes lowered, movements slow, voices soft. They memorized the moods of the men who controlled their fate, searching for small mercies in unpredictable hearts. One woman, taken from a coastal city burned by Roman legions, remembered the sea every night. In her mind, waves drowned out the sounds of chains. She had been a singer once, her voice used for festivals and weddings. Beneath the arena, her voice was forced into silence. When a gladiator approached her cell, she studied the scars on his arms and wondered what had been done to him to make him this way. She understood, even then, that Rome destroyed everyone it touched, it simply chose different methods. The worst terror was uncertainty. Some women were taken above ground to die publicly, thrown to beasts or executed as part of the games. Others vanished into the darkness below, rumored to have been traded, punished, or discarded when they were no longer useful. No explanations were given. Rome did not explain itself to the condemned. At night, when the torches burned low, the women whispered stories to each other. They spoke of home, of gods who might still be listening, of futures they knew they would never see. These stories were acts of rebellion. Rome could own their bodies, but in those moments, it did not own their memories. The gladiators returned to their cells after these underground encounters, praised above for bravery, feared below for cruelty. Some drank themselves into numbness. Some hardened their hearts completely. A few avoided the corridors when they could, haunted by the knowledge that they were both victims and instruments of Rome's appetite for domination. By morning, the sand above would be raked smooth, hiding all evidence of what happened beneath. The crowd would arrive, unaware that the true horror of the arena was not the blood they saw, but the suffering carefully hidden below their feet. Rome called the Colosseum a gift to the people. Bread and circuses, they said, would keep the empire strong. But the empire's strength was built on silence, on stories erased before they could be told. The women beneath the arena became part of that silence, their suffering absorbed into stone and shadow. As days turned into months, the prisoners learned the rhythms of the underground world. They knew when the guards changed shifts, when the beasts were fed, when the gladiators returned from training exhausted and irritable. Knowledge became a form of protection. A warning whisper at the right moment could save someone from being noticed. A shared crust of bread could keep despair from turning fatal. Some women were used to tend wounds, forced to clean blood from armor and flesh. They saw the gladiators up close then, not as legends, but as broken men stitched together again and again so they could continue killing. Scars layered over scars. Eyes dulled by too much death. In these moments, the line between captor and captive blurred, not because power disappeared, but because both were trapped in the same machine. Occasionally, a gladiator would hesitate. He might look away, loosen a grip, or say nothing when a woman spoke out of turn. These moments were rare and dangerous. Compassion was punished swiftly in Rome. Guards watched closely, ensuring fear remained the strongest bond in the underground chambers. The women understood that survival often required invisibility. Those who drew attention, through beauty, defiance, or weakness, were at greater risk. So they learned to fade into the background, to become part of the stone walls themselves. Yet even in invisibility, the damage accumulated. Sleepless nights, constant dread, and the loss of any sense of control carved wounds no medicine could heal. Rumors traveled faster than truth. Some said certain prisoners were sent away to private estates, never to be seen again. Others believed death in the arena was mercy compared to what waited below. These stories were not meant to comfort. They were warnings, reminders that hope could be dangerous if held too tightly. When the games ended and the crowd left, the underground did not rest. The silence afterward was heavy, broken only by chains and quiet sobbing. Rome celebrated victories and heroes, while beneath the arena, women counted who was missing and tried not to imagine why. Years later, when stone collapsed and the empire faded, no official records would describe these corridors. Historians would write about emperors, battles, and grand architecture. The women beneath the arena would remain unnamed, their suffering unmeasured. Rome buried them not with graves, but with forgetting. Yet stone remembers. Every scratch on the walls, every prayer carved in desperation, stands as evidence that these women existed, resisted, and endured. The horror Rome buried was not only what gladiators were made to do, but what an empire allowed itself to become. The arena above has fallen into ruin now, visited by tourists and admired for its scale. Few stop to consider what lies beneath their feet. But the truth remains, echoing softly through history's silence, Rome's greatest cruelty was not the violence it displayed, but the suffering it hid, and the voices it tried, and failed, to erase.